Hello, today I'd like to show you how to make a little pincushion starting with some 5-inch squares. I do love those 5-inch squares, and I actually also love pincushions, so why wouldn't it just be? So what I've done is I've actually used two 5-inch squares that are the same fabric like I've got here. They don't necessarily have to be. You could have two different sides to your pincushion, but you would have a join halfway round, just so that you realise that. So I have shown you in a previous video how to cut a circle from a 5-inch square, like a 4.5-inch diameter circle, and I showed you that in the video Quilting Tips and Techniques 105 on how to make a yo-yo or Suffolk puff starting with a 5-inch square. So it's the same method for cutting my circles out. As you can see here, I've cut my circles from my two 5-inch squares, and I'm just going to quickly show you how I'm going to sew those together. So I've got my two circles cut here, and just go to the sewing machine and just using a 1/4 inch seam allowance, or maybe just slightly less. I wouldn't go any more than 1/4 inch though, and not too much less because you don't want it to undo. So I do a little lock stitch to start with, and then I just sew all the way around that circle, as I said, 1/4 inch or very slightly less than 1/4 inch from the edge. And I'm just going to leave a gap because we need a gap so that we can turn it out the right way, and we're going to stuff it as well. So just move this right along. So I'm going to leave a gap of maybe probably 1.5 inches or so, and again I'm going to lock that off. The reason I lock it off is because I'm turning it and stuffing it through a relatively small hole. It will want to undo if I don't do a little lock stitch there. Now, because I haven't got too big a seam allowance around there, and just make sure that everything's caught in okay in your seam. I don't really need to clip it or anything, but if you had a little bit more, you may want to just put a few little snips just into the seam allowance, but not, of course, into your stitching. And then I'm just going to turn that out through that hole and run my finger quickly around that seam, and that should pop that. If you run your finger around it, it helps push it out in a nice curve, nice, fairly smooth sort of line. So you can see we've got something that's pretty round there, except for this little bit that we're going to stuff. So I'll quickly just show you how to go about the stuffing, because you don't want to just do a whole big clump. You don't want to take your whole big clump and just think, oh, I'm going to need that much, and try and stuff it all in one go. It works much better just to stuff small amounts at a time, and then it just builds up nicely without getting too clumpy and lumpy, because even though this is only a little project that is only having probably pins stuck in it, you still don't want it to be lumpy and clumpy. So I'm just going to show you, and you would just keep putting in just small amounts. Just tease out the filling that you're using, or you could use teased out little ends of batting as a way of using up some offcuts of things like that. This is a polyester fibre fill that I'm using. You could put something else in there, whatever it is that you like to use for stuffing. But whatever it is, I would put it in small quantities so that it just builds up gradually, and you end up with a much nicer, smoother effect. But I have actually already done one. I won't make you watch me do all of that stuffing. So I've done one here, and as you can see, we've lost a little bit of our round shape. And when I sew, I've just over sewn with a little needle and thread the little hole closed. But I'm not too worried about the fact that it's got a little bit of a flat edge there, because by the time we've done all these little stitching lines over here, that will kind of take over, and you won't see those little oddities that might have occurred. And I'm just going to use for my button a shank button. I've got a button either side over the middle there, and it's just got a little shank on the back. These are often quite hard to know what to do with. I have quite a lot of shank buttons, so I was quite excited when I found I could use some of these on my pincushions. And so I've just got a couple of plain ones. You might have a couple of really exotic buttons, but today I'm just using some plain ones. Now I've got some stranded embroidery cotton here. You could use a pearl thread, and I've got it already threaded onto my needle double. So I've got a knot at one end, and I've got it, as you can see, quite long, a little bit more than 1 yard long, doubled, because it needs to be fairly long, surprisingly long, to go in and out several times. And I would rather have it a little bit too long than have to join in another piece, because I'm not very good at doing things like that. So what I'm now going to do, I've got it cut, sewn, stuffed, I've hand sewn over the little edge. So now I'm going to put my needle in roughly where I think the middle is. Now I've got a larger needle than usual as well, just so that it will cope with all this extra sewing, but you don't want it so big that you can't manipulate with it. So I want to find the centre, and I'm kind of eyeballing that a little bit, and it won't matter if it's not exactly the centre, but hopefully somewhere close to the centre. And you want to go all the way through, so you want to come out where you're hoping the centre is on the other side, and pull that all the way through there so that your knot is in there and it's going to pull it into the centre there. Now if you've got a slightly misshapen circle like I have here, I would go to an area that is particularly unattractive perhaps, and I'm going to stitch it through and pull that in. So you can see that that unattractive little area just disappears when I do that. So I'm going to take that around where I want it to be, and I'm going to put my needle back in pretty close to where I had that knotted thread in the first place and push it through to come out pretty close again where I was before. So just keeping an eye on where my thread's going to sit at this stage, because I want it to come in just there. And now I'm going to pull that in tight. Now it seems to be holding quite well, but just keep a little bit of an eye on where it's going. So maybe hold the thread with your thumb there so that it still holds in fairly firm. But we're actually going to sew opposite, as if that was going straight across there now. So I'm going to bring that needle around again to the underside and bring it up again into the middle there. Pull that through. Now I'm holding this because I didn't want it to let go, because I quite like that little indentation. But now that I'm here, I can bring that around so that we effectively have a straight line across, halfway across the circle now. And again, pull that in nice and firm so that you get a little indentation there. And now the same thing, we're going to do 6 of these divisions on this circle. So I'm going to come around here now. So again, I take my needle round to the back, bring it up in the middle again on the front side, and pull that in. And again, just, whoops, we don't want little knots going on. Bring that now around, now that you've held it in place, to about 1/3 of the way along on your circle edge there. And again, pull that in tight. So you've got to kind of hang on to this. This is a little bit fiddly, but not too bad. And again, I'm going to go to the opposite side again now. You could just keep going around that half circle, but I find it overall works better if I keep going opposite where I was, so that I end up with this fairly straight line across each time. And again, pull that in tight so that you get this nice little indent. And now just for the last one, again, go in the center on the other side, bring it up in the middle, so these are a little bit fiddly but kind of fun, and pull that in nicely. And just the last one now, again in the middle on the underside, up in the middle on that side, and center that one so that it just pulls in nicely there. So you can see that whatever wasn't looking round before is now looking absolutely delicious. So now this is probably the hardest bit now, because you've got to keep the tension on that thread, and I just do like a little tiny stitch right in that middle area there, just to sort of hold that. So as you can see, I'm just pushing the cushion out of the way a little bit so that I've got a little stitch in the center, pull my thread through and let that come up. So that's like a little holding stitch, so that won't loosen off now. And now I'm going to thread one of my buttons on through that shank, and I'm going to go right through the center there and come out in the middle area on the underside. So that's sitting nicely in the middle, so pull that in so it's nice and snug. And again, try and do one of those little holding stitches here now, just to hold that button in nice and tight. So again, a little stitch in the center. You won't see all this because it'll be under the button. Pull that up. It's going to hold again, and again, thread your button on. And now we've got to do another little stitch. So just while the button's loose there. Pop another one of those little holding type stitches in close to the centre there. Again, this is all going to be under the button, so you won't see all this if it's starting to look a little bit untidy. That's why you have a nice big button in the middle. Okay, so I've done this stitch there. My button's not pulled in yet. And that's going to pull the button in. And now I want to do another stitch so I can tie my thread off. So this time you have kind of got to hold it in fairly firm. Just a little bit of manipulation required here. And underneath the button, do another little stitch. Another one of those little holding stitches if you can. And this time, before you pull it right the way in, wrap it round your needle a couple of times and then pull that in tight, and that should all sit in underneath the button, and that's now quite secure. And then I just pop my needle in again under the button, but I push it right the way through and bring it out somewhere else in the pincushion, give it a little bit of a tug, and I just snip those ends off right close to the pincushion, and they'll just disappear in there now, and you won't even know it's in there. So there's my little pincushion that I've made starting with 5-inch squares, and that's a lot of fun. I've made a few here. I think that you could have a whole bowl of these. They kind of almost look like little baby pumpkins or something. Either way, they're just very delicious looking. So I just thought that was another little idea of something you might be able to do starting with some 5-inch squares.